Sinon is terrified of guns in real life because of a trauma she never truly escaped. But instead of avoiding that fear, she enters Gun Gale Online, a VR game built entirely around firearms, to face it head-on. That's where she becomes known as Sinon, one of the best sniper players in the entire game. When she was younger, she and her mother were caught in a robbery at a post office. During the chaos, the robber threatened everyone with a gun. In a split-second moment of panic, Shino grabbed the weapon and shot him to stop him. It sounds heroic, but for a child, the experience left deep psychological scars. After that day, she developed an intense fear of guns. Even hearing about them could trigger panic attacks. Around this time, Kirito was approached by Kikuoka with a very unusual request. A series of strange incidents had been taking place in Gun Gale Online, also known as GGO. At first, most people dismissed them as nothing more than rumors. There was a mysterious user in GGO who called himself Deathgun. Deathgun claimed he could kill people in real life by shooting them in the game. Naturally, nobody believed him. But then something strange happened. Two well-known GGO players were targeted by Deathgun. In both cases, Deathgun shot them in-game with his pistol. Almost immediately afterward, both players suddenly disconnected. Not long after disconnecting, both players were found dead in the real world. The victims had died at almost the exact same time their avatars disappeared from the game. So he asked Kirito to enter GGO and investigate Deathgun from the inside. But the moment he arrived, something unexpected happened. Because of his avatar's appearance, everyone assumed he was a girl, and random creeps immediately started hitting on him. It's pretty funny considering he's actually a guy in real life, and he can't even figure out the game before people start flirting with him. That's when he met a player named Sinon. Like everyone else, Sinon also assumed Kirito was a girl at first. She offered to teach him the basics of GGO. Sinon took Kirito to a gun store so he could buy some equipment. The moment Kirito looked at the prices, though, he realized he had a problem. He was completely broke. Thankfully, there were several minigames players could use to earn credits. One of them was especially popular. The challenge was simple. An NPC armed with a handgun would continuously fire at you, and your goal was to dodge every bullet while getting as close as possible. If you managed to reach the NPC and tap them on the shoulder, you won. The prize had grown to 300,000 credits. That's when Kirito decided to give it a try. As soon as the game began, Kirito took off. To everyone's surprise, he was incredibly fast, weaving through the bullets with ease as he rapidly closed the distance. Honestly, it made sense. Kirito had some of the fastest reaction speeds in SAO, and those reflexes carried over. As the crowd watched in disbelief, Kirito reached the NPC and tapped them on the shoulder. Then suddenly, money started pouring out of the machine. Now that he'd won the jackpot, he had more than enough money to buy whatever equipment he wanted. Sinon expected him to spend his winnings on a powerful rifle or maybe a rare handgun. Instead, Kirito bought a sword. You can't even blame Sinon for being annoyed. She takes this game seriously because she's trying to overcome her trauma, and then this random newcomer spends a massive jackpot on what she believes is a useless weapon. Almost nobody in GGO used sword. Using a melee weapon meant getting close enough to your opponent to land a hit. Most players would be eliminated long before they got the chance. Kirito did buy a handgun as a backup, but his main weapon was still the sword. After leaving the shop, Sinon told Kirito about an upcoming tournament known as Bullet of Bullets, or Bobby for short. The tournament brought together some of the strongest players in all of GGO. It began with a bunch of one-on-one matches where players fought for a chance to advance. The winners would then move on to the final stage, which was a massive battle royale featuring all of the remaining players. Only one player would be left standing. As Sinon explained the rules, Kirito realized something. If Deathgun really was targeting the strongest players, Bob might be Kirito's best chance to track him down, which Sinon thought was a terrible idea. Most of the players competing in Bob had spent months or even years mastering the game. The idea that someone who just started could compete against the strongest players in GGO seemed ridiculous. But Kirito didn't care. After signing up for the tournament, Kirito and Sinon headed to a more private area so they could get ready for Bob. Once they arrived, Sinon started changing into her combat gear, and Kirito immediately got nervous and started apologizing. He decided it was a good time to introduce himself, so he told her that his name was Kirito. That's when Sinon finally realized Kirito was a guy. Sinon was horrified. She thought Kirito was a girl the whole time. Embarrassed and furious, she slapped him. While the moment is mostly played for comedy, it also highlights just how unusual Kirito's avatar is in GGO. After that, Sinon wanted nothing to do with Kirito. Kirito's first match in the tournament didn't go the way he expected. The moment the fight started, bullets came flying at him from every direction. Even with his experience from SAO, the speed and pressure of these bullets felt completely different. For a moment, it looked like he might lose. But then Kirito realized he didn't need to avoid every bullet. Instead, he could use his sword to block them as he moved forward. Once he adjusted, the entire fight shifted. He started deflecting shots with his blade, step by step closing the distance. And the moment he finally got close enough to strike, the fight ended instantly. This fight also showed one of Kirito's biggest strengths. Instead of panicking when he was at a disadvantage, he quickly adapted to GGO's mechanics and found a way to use the sword skills he'd developed back in SAO. After the fight ended, Kirito was teleported back to the waiting area where he could watch the remaining matches. A player suddenly appeared right behind him. It was a strange-looking player, acting a bit suspicious, asking again and again if he really was Kirito, talking about his name and his sword skills. Something about him felt familiar. He felt like he'd met him before. Someone from Sword Art Online. Then the player slowly pulled up his sleeve. He was from Laughing Coffin, a player-killing guild from SAO. Kirito was completely shaken. Seeing someone connected to Laughing Coffin brought back memories that he tried to block out ever since escaping the game. During his time in SAO, Kirito was forced to kill 3 members of Laughing Coffin. Even though he knew that taking their lives had saved countless other players, he had never been able to forgive himself for it. And now, seeing that symbol again had brought all of those feelings rushing back. It's a reminder that even though Kirito survived, he's still dealing with a lot of trauma from his time in SAO. Sinon noticed that something was wrong and asked Kirito if he was okay. But before he could answer, his next match began, and he was suddenly teleported into the arena. From that point on, Kirito's fight started going pretty much the same way. It completely threw his opponents off. GGO players were used to gunfights, not someone charging straight through their bullets with a lightsaber, and once he got close enough, the fight was already over. Now it was finally Sinon's turn to fight. She had set herself up inside a tall building, high above everyone else with a clear view of the only entrance her opponent could use to reach her. All she had to do was wait. Down below, her opponent made his move. He came rushing in, hoping the speed and constant movement would make him harder to hit. But Sinon stayed calm and lined up her shot, and with that she took him down. Moments like this are exactly why Sinon had built such a reputation as one of GGO's best snipers. She was ready for anything, and when she pulled the trigger, she rarely missed. After her match, the tournament continued on, but while everyone else was focused on the fights, there was someone else watching from the sidelines. A player named Shinkawa had been there the entire time. He had known Sinon for a long time, both inside and outside of GGO. In real life, he was someone who always looked out for her. He was also studying medicine and was working toward becoming a doctor. Over time, he developed feelings for Sinon. He eventually confessed, but she turned him down. She told him she wasn't ready for a relationship and that she needed to deal with her trauma first, but Shinkawa completely misunderstood what she meant. Instead of accepting her answer, he convinced himself that if Sinon won the Bullet of Bullets tournament, that would somehow be the moment she would finally accept him. Looking back, this is one of the earliest signs that something isn't quite right. What seems like a small crush has already started turning into an unhealthy obsession. As the tournament went on, the remaining matches quickly came to an end. Both Kirito and Sinon had officially made it to the final stage of the Bullet of Bullets tournament. It was a massive battle royale where all the remaining players were dropped into the same battlefield. And to make things even more intense, every 15 minutes a satellite scan would sweep across the map, briefly revealing the location of every surviving player. It's a clever rule because it keeps players from hiding forever, forcing everyone into more direct fights as the match goes on. Before it started, Kirito and Sinon met up one last time to exchange information. They went over the list of competitors, comparing the strongest names they had seen in previous Bobi tournaments. Then Kirito asked her something important. Out of everyone competing, which names did she not recognize from the last tournament? Because if someone new had appeared, there was a chance they could be Deathgun. Out of everyone in the Battle Royale, there were only 3 names she didn't recognize: Jushi X, Pale Rider, and Sturban. After the waiting was over, the Bob final stage began. The battlefield was instantly chaos. Players scattered across the map as they went after each other with everything from rifles to heavy weapons like miniguns. The Battle Royale format also meant players couldn't rely on teamwork anymore, forcing everyone to think for themselves if they wanted to survive. It didn't take long before the first eliminations started rolling in. Sinon quickly took position and looked around for targets. That's when she spotted someone moving through cover with grenades attached to his belt. Without hesitation, Sinon fired, and in a second, the grenades went off on his belt, taking him out with a huge explosion. Just like that, Sinon got her first kill of the Battle Royale. It also showed why patience was one of her biggest strengths. Instead of rushing into fights, she waited for the perfect opportunity to strike. After this, Kirito suddenly appeared on top of the cliff where Sinon was. She was immediately annoyed and considered shooting him on the spot. But he told her he wasn't there for her. He just wanted to watch how this fight would play out. The player Sinon was targeting was moving like nothing she'd seen before. He wasn't just running between cover. He was using the entire area and constantly changing direction to avoid the other player's minigun. Then, when he got the chance, he moved in and eliminated the other player. Sinon was lining up to finish him off when something unexpected happened. A paralysis round suddenly hit the player out of nowhere, stopping him before she could fire. And that's when everything changed. From the shadows, Death Gun appeared. What made it even more scary was how suddenly he appeared. He came out of nowhere, which made him so much more dangerous. Slowly, he walked toward the player. Then he raised his gun and fired. And this time, instead of the usual dead notification, the system only displayed disconnection. That was the moment they realized something was wrong. It was completely different from what normally happened when a player was eliminated. Death Gun had just killed another player right in front of them. And that's when Kirito finally told Sinon what was really going on. He told her that player was Death Gun. And the rumors about players being killed in real life weren't just rumors. 2 people had already been confirmed dead after being shot in-game. After that, they expected Death Gun to come after them, but he just turned and walked away. When the next satellite scan came through, his location was gone. They assumed the only explanation was that he had jumped into the river to avoid being tracked. With no other leads, they teamed up and followed the river toward the nearest town. Once they arrived, they checked the map to see where the remaining players were. That's when they noticed something interesting. Jushi X was in the exact same town. Since Jushi X was one of the few names Sinon didn't recognize from the last Bullet of Bullets tournament, they thought he might be Death Gun. So they decided to go after him. Kirito would sneak around from behind and try to take Jushi X by surprise, while Sinon would provide cover from a nearby tall building with her sniper rifle. But they had no idea this decision would come back to haunt them. While Sinon was making her way to the building, she got distracted for just a moment, and that was all it took. It's a reminder that in GGO, even a split second of losing focus can completely change the outcome of a fight. A paralysis round suddenly hit her, and she fell to the ground, unable to move. Then, from the shadows, Death Gun appeared. Slowly, he walked toward her, before turning his attention to Kirito. He said it was finally time to find out if Kirito was who he thought he was. If he killed Kirito's friend right in front of him, and that same rage came out again, then he would know for sure. As if the situation wasn't already bad enough, things got even worse for Sinon. When she looked at Death Gun's weapon, she froze. It was a Type 54 Black Star, the same type of gun that was used during the robbery that traumatized her as a child. The moment she recognized it, all of those memories came rushing back. Slowly, he raised the pistol and prepared to fire. But just before he could pull the trigger, shots came from behind him. Death Gun was forced to move, and that's when Kirito rushed in and grabbed Sinon. He carried her as he ran through the town, trying to get as far away from Death Gun as possible. After a while, he spotted a motorcycle nearby. Without wasting any time, the 2 of them jumped on and sped off. And for a moment, it felt like they escaped. But when Kirito looked behind them, he saw Death Gun still after them, and he was catching up fast. Sinon quickly shot at him with her sniper rifle, but she missed. However, the bullet hit a nearby truck, causing a huge explosion that blocked the road behind them. The explosion bought them enough time to finally lose Death Gun. After driving for a while, Kirito and Sinon found a cave where they could hide and catch their breath. With Death Gun gone for the moment, the 2 finally had a chance to talk. Until now, they had mostly been strangers, but after everything they had been through together, they slowly began opening up to each other. Sinon told Kirito about the traumatic incident from her childhood that left her terrified of guns in the real world. She explained that the reason she played GGO because she hoped facing them in a virtual world would help her overcome that fear. Kirito then shared his own past from Sword Art Online. He admitted that he had been forced to kill members of Laughing Coffin to protect other players, but even years later, the guilt had never gone away. This conversation becomes a major turning point for both characters. For years, both Kirito and Sinon had been carrying the weight of their past alone. But by finally opening up to each other, they realized they weren't the only ones struggling with their trauma. As they talked about everything that had happened so far, they started connecting the dots. Death Gun wasn't working alone. Kirito realized that the player inside GGO would shoot the target, but at that exact same time, an accomplice in the real world would break into the victim's apartment and inject them with a deadly poison that stopped their heart. Because both events happened at the same time, everyone believed Death Gun had somehow gained the power to kill people through the game. They also realized how the group had been finding their victims. When players signed up for Bob, they had to enter their real-world address. Using his cloak to stay hidden, Death Gun had secretly watched his targets register, allowing his accomplices to learn exactly where they lived. Since many of the players lived alone in apartments with very little security, breaking in was much easier. But then Kirito realized something even worse. The reason Death Gun had targeted Sinon was because she was his next victim, which meant while Death Gun was trying to shoot her inside GGO, another member of the group was most likely already on his way to her apartment in the real world, ready to inject the poison the moment she was hit. Suddenly, escaping the tournament wasn't the only thing they had to worry about. They were now racing against time to save Sinon's life. After figuring this out, Kirito and Sinon knew they couldn't keep hiding. They needed to end the fight before Death Gun could make his next move. After checking the latest satellite scan, they realized there were only 4 players left in the tournament. The remaining players were Kirito, Sinon, Death Gun, and Yamakaze. That's when they came up with a plan. Kirito would act as bait, drawing the other 2 players toward him. Meanwhile, Sinon would climb to a high vantage point and wait with her sniper rifle. If everything went according to plan, Death Gun and Yamakaze would both focus on Kirito, revealing their location. The moment Yamakaze exposed himself, Sinon would take him out. Then, with only Death Gun left, the 2 of them would team up and finish the fight together. It was a risky plan. If anything went wrong, Kirito would be left fighting both of them by himself. And if Death Gun managed to kill him first, Sinon would be alone, and Death Gun could come after her in the real world. With their plan in place, Kirito and Sinon split up. Sinon set herself up high, giving her a clear view of the battlefield through her sniper. Meanwhile, Kirito walked into an open area and waited, making himself the perfect target. A few moments later, Sinon spotted Yamakaze sprinting straight toward Kirito. But she stayed calm and waited for the right moment. She knew she only had one chance, and if she missed, their entire plan could fall apart. Yamakaze eventually stopped and raised his rifle, carefully lining up a shot on Kirito. He barely managed to dodge as the bullet flew past him. Yamakaze kept firing, but Kirito blocked each shot with his sword, buying Sinon the few seconds she needed. Then, the moment an opening appeared, she pulled the trigger. Her shot struck Yamakaze, eliminating him from the tournament. Now there was only one enemy left. Death Gun. Death Gun immediately turned his attention back to Kirito, firing round after round, while Kirito continued deflecting the bullets with his sword as he slowly got closer. At the same time, Sinon aimed her sniper rifle at Death Gun, ready to take him out. Before she could fire, Death Gun noticed her. Both of them pulled the trigger at exactly the same time, causing both shots to miss. The collision also shattered both of their scopes, making them useless. With Sinon no longer able to provide cover, Kirito was now completely on his own. He charged straight at Death Gun, hoping to end the fight before things got even worse. But Death Gun was ready. He dodged Kirito's attack before striking back, forcing Kirito to retreat. The two paused for a moment, and Kirito revealed that he figured out how Death Gun's murders actually worked. Kirito warned him that it was only a matter of time before the police discovered the truth. The government already had records of every Sword Art Online survivor. Once they connected Death Gun's username to his real identity, they would eventually find his name and address. But Death Gun wasn't worried. Instead, he laughed. He reminded Kirito of their encounter after the raid on Laughing Coffin back in Sao. He had tried to tell Kirito his name that day, but Kirito refused to listen, saying there was no point in remembering the name of another murderer. Because of that, Deathgun believed Kirito would never be able to identify him. Then the fight began once again. Deathgun struck Kirito in the stomach before continuing to strike. He was incredibly fast, giving Kirito almost no time to defend himself. Each slash forced Kirito further backward as new cuts appeared across his body. This fight also shows why Deathgun was so dangerous. His greatest weapon wasn't just his sniper rifle, it was the combat experience he had gained as a member of Laughing Coffin. Even while defending himself, Kirito continued searching through his memories, trying to remember where he had seen Deathgun before. Then he noticed something: his red eyes. Suddenly, everything clicked. His name was Red-Eyed Zaxa, one of Laughing Coffin's infamous members. Kirito had heard that name years earlier during the meeting for the fight against the guild. The moment Kirito said his name, the battle came to a stop. Deathgun froze. For the first time since the fight began, he looked genuinely shocked. A bullet line suddenly appeared across his chest. Although her damaged scope prevented her from landing a perfect shot, the attack distracted Deathgun for just long enough and was all Kirito needed. Kirito rushed forward before Deathgun could react. Realizing he was losing control of the fight, Deathgun activated his invisibility cloak and attempted to escape. But Kirito was already prepared. At the last second, he pulled out his handgun and fired. Without hesitating, he got closer and got the final strike, defeating Deathgun once and for all. Kirito didn't win simply because he was stronger. The turning point of the battle came when he broke Deathgun's confidence. After the fight, Kirito finally reunited with Sinon. Both of them were relieved that the nightmare was finally over. After everything they had survived together, they exchanged their real-world contact information. Kirito also promised that after they logged out, he would personally come meet her to make sure she was safe. But before they could leave, there was still one thing they had to do. The tournament wasn't over yet. Since Kirito was completely exhausted after his fight with Deathgun, he knew he didn't have enough energy for another fight. So instead, the two came up with a simple solution. They used a grenade, causing both of them to be eliminated at the exact same time. Because they were the last two players remaining, they were both the winners of the Bullet of Bullets tournament. Although winning was the goal at the beginning, by this point the tournament had become much more than just a competition. Surviving the battle and stopping Deathgun mattered far more than the title of being the strongest player. When Sinon logged out, she immediately looked around her apartment and felt relieved when she realized nobody was there. For a moment, it seemed like everything was finally over. But then, a sudden knock at the door made her panic. Thankfully, it was only Shinkawa. He came over to celebrate her victory in the Bob tournament and even brought food with him. At first, he seemed genuinely happy for her, but that quickly changed. Shinkawa revealed that he had been waiting for this moment. He believed that after the tournament ended, Sinon would finally belong to him. The friendly person Sinon thought she knew disappeared, revealing a much darker side of him. He suddenly grabbed onto her and told her that she was his. Shocked and uncomfortable, Sinon pushed him away, but instead of backing down, Shinkawa became angry. He accused her of breaking her promise and claimed that she had promised she would be his. Then things became even more terrifying. Shinkawa pulled out a strange device and pressed it against Sinon's side. Inside was a syringe filled with deadly poison. He explained that if Sinon tried to move, the device would activate and kill her. This was the moment Sinon finally realized the truth. Shinkawa was one of the people behind Deathgun. He revealed that he was Deathgun's right-hand man. He explained that he was responsible for killing Yamakaze and Zagseed inside GGO, while the other Deathgun, his brother, was the one who injected the victims in the real world. The reveal completely changed how Sinon viewed the tournament. What seemed like a dangerous game was actually connected to a real-world murder plan, showing that the threat of Deathgun was never limited to the virtual world. But this time, Shinkawa wanted to carry out the murder himself. He wanted to prove that Deathgun was the most powerful player and make everyone remember his name. As Shinkawa continued acting more disturbing, she realized something important. The person standing in front of her wasn't someone who cared about her. He was someone who wanted to control her. She finally gathered the courage to fight back. She punched Shinkawa in the face, knocking him off balance. With an opening to escape, Sinon ran toward the door. For a moment, it looked like she was finally going to get away. But just before she could open it, Shinkawa grabbed her again and pulled her back. He forced her to the ground, stopping her from escaping. This moment showed how much Sinon had changed throughout the arc. Earlier, her trauma caused her to freeze when facing danger, but now she was actively fighting back against someone trying to take control of her life. Just then, Kirito arrived. He rushed inside and knocked Shinkawa away from Sinon. Kirito began fighting back, landing several punches as he tried to stop him. He shouted for Sinon to run, but Sinon refused to leave him behind. The syringe was still a threat, and she couldn't allow Kirito to get hurt because of her. As the fight continued, Shinkawa eventually managed to overpower him. Then, he pulled out the syringe and injected him. Seeing what was happening, Sinon grabbed a nearby box and struck Shinkawa over the head. The attack knocked him unconscious, finally ending the threat. Sinon immediately rushed over to Kirito to make sure he was okay. Luckily, Kirito had survived because of an incredible coincidence. While he was playing in VR, he had been connected to a heart monitor to make sure his body was safe. One of the sensors from the monitor was still attached to his chest. The needle hit the sensor instead of Kirito himself, saving his life. It was a close call, but it also represented how the danger from Death Gun had finally reached its end. The battle that started inside GGO had become a real-world fight for survival, and both Kirito and Sinon were able to escape it. A little while later, Kirito and Sinon met up with Kikuoka to explain everything they had discovered. At first, Shinkawa and his brother only talked about killing Zexid as a joke, but the more they discussed it, the more they thought they could get away with it. This was one of the most disturbing parts of the Death Gun case. They'd been planning it for months. To make their plan possible, they stole a master keycard from their father's hospital, which was supposed to be used only for emergencies. They also obtained the poison needed to carry out the real-world side of the murders. They carefully chose their targets, focusing on players who lived alone and had weaker security, making it easier for them to break into their homes. They killed Pale Rider and Garrett, and they planned to make Sinon their next victim. To help coordinate their murders, they also recruited another person named Atsushi. Atsushi was a friend of Shinkawa's brother, Kyuji, from their time trapped inside Sword Art Online. Back in 2022, Kyuji had been trapped in Sao, where he became a member of the infamous player-killing guild Laughing Coffin alongside Atsushi. After escaping the game, Kyuji told his brother about everything he had experienced, including the people he had killed. Instead of being horrified by his brother's actions, Shinkawa became fascinated by him. He idolized the person his brother had become inside Sao, and that obsession eventually led him to help continue the Death Gun murders. Later on, Kirito took Sinon to Agil's bar so she could meet some of his friends. However, he also had something planned that he hadn't told her about. After they talked for a while, a woman and her daughter approached them and introduced themselves. The woman explained that she worked at the post office where the robbery happened years earlier. At first, Sinon was overwhelmed with fear. She didn't want to think about that moment again or face the memory of taking someone's life. But then the woman revealed something that completely changed how Sinon viewed the event. She explained that she had been pregnant with her daughter during the robbery. If Sinon hadn't stepped in and stopped the attacker, both of their lives could have been lost. For the first time, Sinon was forced to see that memory from a different perspective. For years, she had only focused on the life she took, but now she had to acknowledge the lives she saved. This was the true conclusion of Sinon's character arc. Kirito reminded her that she had the right to think about the people she saved, and that maybe it was finally time for her to begin forgiving herself.